look at that. The Big Eddy, where the waters of the Minnesota River bump up against some 3.5 billion-year-old rock and turn back on themselves. It's an unusual sight, water going downstream and 50 feet away, water apparently flowing upstream. This peculiar geological feature illustrates both a geological uniqueness and a cultural uncertainty within a radius of 50 miles of the Big Eddy. The geological uniqueness centers on some of the oldest rock outcrops in North America, Morton Gneiss it's called, exposed by the ancient glacial river Warren, which carved out the Minnesota Valley. That rock pokes out lots of places, and because it was useless for farmland, is home to
over 150 species of rare flora and fauna that just don't exist in other places around the Great Plains.
Those flora and fauna center on an old school building in Morton, Minnesota. And because there's so much other history nearby, Carl Caldwell sees an opportunity.
What we're trying to do is to establish a learning center where kids can understand what came before them, understand that they are, in fact, standing on the shoulders of giants, that the people that came before them, no matter what flavor they are, or what culture they came from, or what place on the planet they came from, they did remarkable things here to establish a part of the country at a time when the country was in a critical formative period.
That critical formative period shows in any of 200 or so monuments scattered around this part of the state, monuments erected more than 100 years ago. 3 mark the locations of trading posts burned during the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862. 1 shows the location of Chief Wabashaw's village. 8 miles away, another memorializes the Schwant family, 8 of whom were killed in the war. Another marks the location of a court-martial which convicted and sentenced to death, the monument says, more than 100 Sioux Indians in November of 1862. A closer estimate would be more than 300. All but 40 or so were later pardoned. The 2 tallest monuments are on a bluff on the eastern edge of Morton, memorializing the Battle of Birch Coulee. They carry the names of 164 people who fought in the biggest battle of the U.S.-Dakota War.
The events that happened here in 1862 in particular were so volatile and continue to be such a source of frustration for both sides that people tend to not talk about it.
There's a certain nervousness about wanting to talk about it, and it's kind of like families. You know, there's certain things you just don't talk about because it's just easier if we don't talk about them. And in this case, to move ahead, you do need to bring closure and figure out how you're going to move forward.
Pauline Nickel has joined Carl Caldwell and others to build a place to move forward, the Minnesota Valley History Learning Center. Fellow board member Teresa Peterson thinks it's an important endeavor.
There's a lot of healing that needs to occur. There's a lot of mistrust and misinformation on all sides, I think. And so I think this, again, is an opportunity, yeah, to have a larger audience, to have a real opportunity for a dialogue to occur.
The Minnesota Valley History Learning Center will center on the front yard of some of those 3.5 billion-year-old rocks, the building where Carl Caldwell received his high school diploma. But the study will be outside, at the many unique sites outdoors.
We want to put them out in the context and on the locations where historical events occurred. Where this violent volcanic molten rock formed, we want to put them on a zip line and send them across to the other side so that they can go 35 miles an hour above 3.5 billion-year-old granite and have it be a significant emotional event. We want to stand them on the battlefields and discuss the places where their ancestors fought and died to establish the Minnesota that we know today.
So historical monuments placed more than a century ago will be used as educational tools, along with 3.5 billion-year-old rock and century-old quarries and wild asters and the Minnesota River and stories told by descendants and researchers. The folks of the Minnesota Valley History Learning Center want to put people in these pictures. People, young and not so young, learning and discussing and appreciating geological and cultural history that makes Minnesota amazing.